morning has arrived again. I sat up slowly, brushing crumbs, buttons, and what I truly hope was dried soup from my tunic. Bokk, my ever-faithful chicken, sat on the windowsill like a brooding gargoyle. He watched the townsfolk below with the silent judgment of someone who's been reincarnated at least twice, and is over it. I groaned, cracked my neck, and performed my traditional morning routine. 1. Pat self for money. 2. Discover nothing. 3. Pretend it's part of a dramatic scene in a play called Empty Pockets and Full Delusion. Time to greet the day, I muttered, pulling on my boots. One had a hole in the toe. The other had a pebble named Regret. Bokk clucked once, just once, but it was the emotional weight of the cluck that hit the hardest. A perfect blend of pity, disbelief, and the faint sound of a disappointed violin string. The smell of roasted onions and last night's spilled ale greeted me at the base of the stairs. The Hollow Oak Tavern was already bustling. Well, Grimwood bustling, which meant 2 men playing dice for some fantasy role-playing game they made up, one hacking into a mug, and someone inexplicably sharpening a carrot with a fork. Talia stood behind the bar with a kind of no-nonsense efficiency that suggested she'd once lost a staring contest to a tax auditor and had been emotionally overcorrecting ever since. Dressed in her usual ensemble, a plain but questionably modest blouse and a well-worn apron, she moved with the practiced grace of someone who could pour ale, diffuse a bar fight, and judge your life choices all at the same time. Her shoulder-length hair flowed with theatrical flair every time she turned, as if even her follicles had bought into the hustle.
"Morning, Bozwick,"
she said without looking up.
"You still owe for last night."
Ah, there it was. "Dear Talia," I began, lowering myself into a stool like a noble settling onto a throne of modest shame. "Today is a day ripe with potential. Coin will come. Performances will unfold. Rent, dear heart, will be paid." She poured me a modest bowl of breakfast. A dish I'm convinced started life as soup, gave up halfway through and decided to become an existential crisis.
"You said the same thing yesterday."
"And I was so close," I said, poking the bowl. "There was almost coin." She handed me a cracked spoon and walked off. I ate in silence, broken only by the sound of Bokk hopping up onto the stool beside me and staring deeply into my food, with the same expression I once saw on a noble, right before he fainted during my one-man play. To breathe or not to breathe. A pantomime. A man at the far table, a portly fellow with crumbs in his beard and a nose that had clearly made many regrettable life choices, stood up, wiping his mouth.
"Well, Talia?"
he called cheerfully, setting a few coins on the counter.
"Happy birthday."
I froze mid-spoon. Birthday? I slowly turned to face her, just as she nodded with a polite smile.
"Thanks, Elric."
Elric waved and waddled out the door, whistling the off-key notes of a tune no one else recognized. I blinked. Bokk pecked the side of my bowl, annoyed at the pause. Birthday. Talia's birthday. And I had no idea. And worse, I was eating food I hadn't paid for on her birthday. This, surely, was the lowest point of my week. I didn't say anything, didn't flinch. Just filed it away in the part of my brain labeled immediate priorities right after rent and dignity, if available. Surprise was now the goal. Flowers, something meaningful, something poetic. After, of course, I solved the more pressing issue of not being evicted by dinner. Bokk blinked up at me. "We need a job," I whispered. "And fast." He clucked once in agreement, fluffed his feathers, and pooped on the stool. A fitting punctuation mark to my sense of urgency. There are few sights in Grimwood Peaks more tragic than the town job board, except perhaps my reflection before breakfast, or the soup special on Thursdays. Located between the blacksmiths and a suspiciously always empty candy shop that may or may not be a front for illegal spoon fighting. Don't ask. The board leans against a splintered post like a drunk who's made peace with the cobblestones. Bokk and I approached cautiously. He strutted ahead like a scout assessing enemy territory. I followed with all the enthusiasm of a bard asked to lift something heavier than a metaphor. Pinned to the board were job listings in varying states of decay, most written by people whose penmanship could be legally classified as a cry for help. Let's peruse, shall we? Urgent. Chimney sweep needed. Preferably small, immune to soot, and lacking a sense of smell. I nudged Bokk. That's you, isn't it? He turned slowly, giving me a look that said, "Do I look like I take soot-based contracts, peasant?" Wanted. Pest control for unusually aggressive rats in cellar. Will pay extra if you survive. Pass. Fish gutter needed. Must bring own apron, strong stomach, and flexible morality. Pass. Dungeon raider needed to retrieve a golden statue from a dragon-infested cave. Hard pass, I'm afraid. I'm an artist of impeccable stagecraft, not some bargain bin burglar with a death wish and no advance payment. I stepped back and crossed my arms, surveying the entire miserable collection of opportunities. I could feel Talia's disappointed stare from across town, a haunting presence powered by pure skepticism. The most painful part? These jobs were attainable, very doable. Any reasonable person with work ethic, basic muscles, and no artistic integrity could earn coin doing them. But I, dear reader, am not reasonable, nor am I muscular. And my artistic integrity is the only thing standing between me and sweeping chimneys in exchange for old biscuits. Bokk hopped up onto the bottom plank of the board and stared at me pointedly. He let out a single cluck that sounded exactly like, "You're choosing starvation out of sheer stubbornness." With a sigh that could have earned me a standing ovation at a funeral, I turned from the board and began to wander the streets, hoping, no, believing, that somewhere in Grimwood was an opportunity tailored to my unique skill set. Namely, overconfidence, dramatic flailing, and monologues involving poultry. You can tell a real traveling performance troupe by the smell. Not just any smell, mind you, but a distinct blend of sawdust, mothballs, stage makeup, and someone's overripe onions they forgot were still in the prop basket. A scent that screams, "We have suffered for this art, and you're going to sit there and clap anyway." So naturally, when I caught that unmistakable aroma wafting through the Grimwood square, I followed it like a bloodhound with dramatic tendencies. There they were, a modest troupe of performers in flowing cloaks, floppy hats, and the kind of boots that suggest long days on muddy roads, and even longer nights in crowded inns with no soundproofing. Their caravan was a marvel, a horse-drawn contraption that unfolded like a drunken accordion into a full stage complete with backdrop curtains, wooden risers, and a suspiciously creaky trapdoor that no doubt had swallowed more than one understudy. The wagons were painted with elaborate illustrations, masks, flames, dramatic silhouettes in improbable poses. It was like someone had taken the inside of my brain and smeared it all over a wheelbarrow. I approached casually. That is to say, I attempted a casual saunter, caught my cloak on a cart axle, spun in place like a decorative weather vane, and tried to bow while detangling myself. "Greetings," I declared, while still partially lodged under a wagon. "I am Bozwick the Bard, actor, thespian, interpretive goat impersonator. I come in search of collaboration and coin." The first person to respond was a dwarf with a painted beard and a scowl that could curdle milk. She looked me over as if assessing whether I'd been recently cursed.
"Did you say goat impersonator?"
she asked. "Only on weekends. I'm a dragon born of many talents." A lanky elf emerged from behind the curtain, a clipboard in one hand and a red scarf tied around his neck so tightly I'm certain it was more for self-discipline than fashion.
"We're not hiring."
"But consider," I replied, brushing dust off my tunic, "you stand before a performer of boundless charisma and modest hygiene. I bring flair, I bring spontaneity, I bring a chicken with perfect comedic timing." Bokk strutted out from behind me, hopped up on a crate, and glared at them like they owed him corn and an apology. The elf squinted.
Why is that chicken judging me?
He's very emotionally aware, I said proudly. A gnome woman wearing a headband full of sewing pins looked at me over a costume rack.
Can you juggle?
No,
Can you sing?
not legally.
Dance?
I have motion? The dwarf snorted again.
You are not exactly inspiring confidence, Dragon Man.
Ah, but confidence, I said, raising a dramatic finger, is for the uninspired. What I offer you is unpredictability. You don't know what I'll do, and neither do I. That's entertainment. There was a long pause as they all looked at one another, as if weighing the pros and cons of letting this unfold versus setting the wagon on fire and pretending I'd never arrived. Finally, the elf groaned.
Fine, you can perform, but you go last. And if the crowd riots or throws tomatoes again, we are not paying your dry cleaning.
I once wore tomatoes as a cape in a production of the Salad Rebellion. I fear no produce.
Payment is 1 gold coin, only if you're well received.
And if I'm not,
You will leave with nothing.
no complimentary piece of wardrobe?
You will be lucky if you leave with your dignity.
The dwarf rolled her eyes. Dignity is optional, I said. I travel light. They didn't laugh. Not a single one of them. Tough crowd. But I wasn't worried. I had Bokk. I had props. I had a monologue about the moral consequences of overcooked lentils. And soon, the stage would be mine. I stood just off stage, clutching my script, which was really a napkin with "wing it" scribbled across it in gravy, and adjusted the tiny cape around Bokk's shoulders. He gave me a side eye that suggested legal action was forthcoming. The troupe had gone through their entire lineup. A tumbling act that nearly took out an old woman in the second row. A ballad about turnip farming that might have been a threat disguised as song. And a comedy bit involving fish guts and a very brave goblin in tights. The audience was still present, which I took as a good sign.
Hey, Bozwick, you're on.
Called the dwarf, with the mustache and permanent sneer. I inhaled deeply. Actor's breath, I call it. Equal parts confidence and undigested cheese. The curtain was drawn back, and there I was, bathed in the dim golden light of late afternoon sun, standing on a stage made of questionable timber and ambition. The crowd stared with all the warmth of unpaid debt collectors. I raised my arms and began. As I concluded my one-of-a-kind, borderline genius performance, I raised my arms to the heavens, fully expecting thunderous applause, a standing ovation, and perhaps a parade in my honor. There was silence. Long, awkward, and uncomfortable silence. Then, applause. A few scattered at first, then more, until someone actually whistled. An old man stood and yelled, "Best use of a chicken since last winter's feast!" I bowed so low, I saw my own boot soles. The applause, glorious, awkward, possibly sarcastic applause, faded slowly, like a drunken bard exiting the wrong wedding. I stood frozen, arms raised, chest heaving, expression caught somewhere between modest humility and full-blown smugness.
Not bad.
Muttered the tall elf from the troupe as he approached. Arms crossed, lips thin.
You're unconventional.
Unconventional, I said, tapping my chest, is just another word for effective. He handed me a single gold coin. It was warm from his pocket and possibly sticky, but in that moment, it was the most beautiful, greasy-smelling, heavy little circle of validation I had ever held.
1 coin, as agreed. You got laughs no one left mid-show, and someone cried for reasons I'm not sure I want to unpack. That's a win.
As I stepped off stage, a few townsfolk patted me on the back. One woman offered me a bouquet of day-old flowers. A small child asked if Bokk was available for birthday parties. He fluffed his feathers and pecked a button off her tunic. So that was a yes, I suppose. I strutted back into the Hollow Oak Inn like a man who'd been vindicated by destiny and poultry. My cloak, borrowed, unwashed, theatrically draped, billowed behind me. Bokk rode on my shoulder like a tiny, judgmental squire. Talia was at the bar, scrubbing mugs with the enthusiasm of someone scrubbing thoughts of me out of her memory. I dropped the gold coin onto the counter with a flourish, so dramatic it might have registered on a bardic seismograph. "For 2 nights, a bowl of stew and your finest sarcastic stare," I declared. Talia glanced at the coin.
You actually did it?
Amazing, aren't I? She scooped the coin into her apron pocket and poured me a mug of something steaming and mysterious. I sipped the drink. "Oh," I added, digging into my satchel. "And since today's the day of your annual birth-based celebration," I handed her the bouquet of day-old flowers, but still charming. "It's the thought that counts, right?" She blinked.
You got me flowers? Were they stolen?
"Oh, ye of little faith, my dear Talia. Of course they were not stolen. They were given they were rightfully acquired through a legal and consensual transaction." Talia stared at me, and for a moment, just a flicker, there was something that looked suspiciously like appreciation in her eyes.
They're nice. Thank you, Bozwick. Truly. But don't think for a second that this charming little display of generosity is going to make me forget yet again that you will still owe me rent again soon, along with the growing pile of miscellaneous expenses you conveniently misplace in that theatrical brain of yours.
I gave her a winning smile and a theatrical bow, just to keep the peace and avoid spontaneous combustion. Bokk hopped up onto the bar, clucked meaningfully, and knocked over the salt shaker. Classic. "Not bad," I told him. "We survived the day. We entertained the masses. We gave Talia a reason to briefly reconsider kicking me out." He squawked without lifting his head. Translation: "Don't ruin it." "I know," I said. "It won't last. But still, we got 2 days of food, a bed that doesn't smell like pickled onions, and a barmaid who only slightly hates me today." I leaned back in my chair, arms stretched, heart full, belly half full with the strange concoction Talia so graciously provided me. And for just one moment, I felt like a real bard, the kind with purpose, talent, and a chicken. And so ends another tale from the streets of Grimwood Peaks, a city where dreams go to get rained on, and sometimes, just sometimes, get rewarded with a gold coin and an actual thank you. I had survived another day of rent, earned a smirk from Talia, and given Bokk a leftover garlic bread tribute. Would it all collapse tomorrow? Probably. Would I be prepared? Emotionally? No, but theatrically? Always.